Welcome to Inner Whispers Radio. This is episode 20. My name is Alan. I'm the host of the show. And this show features April Crawford, who's a full-body, open-deep trance channel and best-selling author, as well as VERONICA, which is our name for a causal plane entity that speaks to us on a variety of subjects. April will say a few words, then we'll bring in VERONICA and pose a bunch of subjects that people have written in about. And at the end, of course, VERONICA will have a message to you and the world.
Hi, everyone. It's April, and this is my little segment of the show that I get to talk to everybody once a week. And recently that a lot of people think that, I've read a lot of the books that the entities have written. And actually, I haven't read any of them. I finally read Ashram Tang maybe a couple months ago because I was going to give a copy to a friend of mine. And I thought, well, maybe I should read it, see what's in it. So I gave the copy to my friend, and then I read through the book. And that book was written about almost 10 years ago. And it was the only book I've read. I've never read Parting Notes. I've never read the Inner Whispers, none of that, because I always want to keep the integrity of the work with the entities and not have any of my consciousness get in the way at all. The only one that I have read even part of, and it was really only my part, was the one Match Made in Heaven, which was kind of like the story about how all this started. And that one I read because I was consciously the one that wrote that. So in that, it also means that the newsletter that we still put out every week, I rarely read what the channeled message is. I usually let VERONICA come through. She does it. I hand it to Alan, handwritten, and I walk away. But in the last week, some of the papers were left on the desk, and I went to pick them up, and I looked down, and I saw that, there was an Inner Whispers channeling, and I thought, I'll take a look at it. And this is probably only the second or third one that I've ever looked at ever, and we've been doing the newsletter for probably a good 10 years too. And I noticed one of the things that VERONICA talked about. She said you should watch a sunrise. There's something about a sunrise that opens up the energy and makes you feel the magnificence of being in the physical reality. And I said to myself at the time, oh, that's nice. That's a nice little item to say, but I didn't really take it in, and I didn't really think, oh, I'm going to run out and do that. And this morning, I had an appointment. We live on the Burbank side, and then to go into, like, the city, you have to go over, it's called going over the hill. And I had to go over the hill this morning extremely early. I had a 7 a.m. appointment. So I was going up through the canyon, and I get all the way up to the top of Mulholland, and the sun is just coming up over the ridge. And I was sitting at a stop sign, mesmerized by the look of it and the feel of it. And I said, wow, this is what VERONICA's talking about, the magnificence of the sun coming up over the crest. And I was in a really good spot to see it. And it did change my perspective a little bit for this day because it was so beautiful and not something that I have seen in a long time. I'm not, the early bird kind of girl. I'm usually the sleep in a little bit kind of girl. And it was a beautiful thing. So I just wanted to tell everybody that if you read the newsletter, do that exercise. Get up early or be out someplace early where you can see the sun come up. Now, I just happen to be at the top of Mulholland, and if you live in or have been to Southern California, Mulholland is a road that goes across the mountaintops that sort of separates the valley from the sort of Hollywood side of Los Angeles. So I got an extra treat because it was coming up over the hills and there was mist, and it was something out of a movie. But it did change my perspective for the whole day. I felt more alive as I came down the hill. I was like, wow. And I kept thinking that the whole time I was at my appointment, the whole drive home, and it really did help. It's kind of changed how I was thinking for the day. So I thought I would share that because that's kind of my perspective. And everyone should, over the holidays, if you have time, get up and watch that sunrise.
Thank you, April. And now, as I wait for Veronica to drop by, and she will be soon because she knows we do these things, questions and comments on the comment section of these podcasts. And they get first priority, and then we have emails, of course, also. Veronica is here. So, this is from Louise. And I'll mention that some people may think these are kind of heavy subjects, but all questions, all comments are valid, and we try to address as many as we can. So I'm going to paraphrase this because it's quite a long comment. But Louise says she's not a practicing Catholic, but she certainly has been influenced by its teachings. I reject most of them, but when I became an adult, one thing still bothers me. And then she says she suffers from a degenerative disease. She's 60 years old. She's been married almost 50 years to the love of her life. She's raised 5 children. She has grandchildren. But she says, I think I've accomplished all I can. So Veronica says there's no judgment on the other side. But, Veronica, would an action like taking my life impede my soul's progress under these circumstances? Thank you.
Good day, everyone. It is Veronica, and we have listened to the question. Taking one's life is usually a very painful kind of experience. It means that you have perhaps given up hope, or you have things going on that you don't want to have to experience. Usually someone who takes their life has given up, we'll say. We would say there is no judgment on the other side, only you. You will take a look at it, and you will be met by those who would be helpful to you. We realize that there are some religious faiths that say, okay, you're forever damned to hell for doing such a thing. And those kinds of rough terms were created by a church that was trying to discourage people from doing that, to try to teach them that's not what you do. But there are times where things come up where the pain is so great that one can just simply cannot continue. And when that happens, and it's always unfortunate because life is a great gift, we would say that there would be many energies who would come to embrace, help, and help you try to find the root of why you would have done this. Now, if it's an item that you're trying to escape, after contemplation and review, you most likely would recreate yourself back into a similar type of environment so that you could overcome the cause of the abdication. But again, there is no one sitting on some throne somewhere dictating and judging you about actions that you take. And we do realize that there is quite a controversy about those who are very terminally ill. If you're going to cross anyway, why suffer? All of these are individual choices. None of them are severely judged. But if you're doing it to escape something or doing it because there's great pain about something, you usually have to come back and address it in some way. So most likely you would circle right back around and be right where you were. So again, it's all choice, and there is no standard answer here. It's all very individualistic, and what might be right for someone might be completely wrong for someone else. So there's no standard answer. It is an individual moment.
Thank you, Veronica. Now I have a question that is a theme that is running through from time to time, and I think there'll be more questions in later broadcasts, maybe even in this one, as I check the comments. But Katie is very concerned about animal cruelty and says there's a lot of it and it's very bad. And her question is, are these people who, misuse animals? And I'm not sure if she's talking about food animals or just people who are like animal cruelty. But she wants to know, are these people born evil? Do they have a blueprint in how to torture and kill and abandon animals? And then she says she personally thinks it's the denseness or density linear reality that drives them to do what they do. So, to summarize, there's cruelty to animals, which is against the law. And then there's also, I don't know if she's talking about people who are not vegetarians. So what do you think about this? Are these people born evil?
We do not believe that anyone could be born evil. We think that becoming negative is usually a separation from one's own soul or a condition of behavior and energy that they have received themselves, and they are merely mirroring it back and trying to dissipate it. We think that when it comes to animal cruelty and the hurting of animals, there are some animals that come in to understand that they are to be part of a food group and they're more of a mass consciousness kinds of thing. But those who will come in and harm an animal, there is consequence for that. It's like harming a human. If you were to tie a person up outside and leave them outside in the hot sun all day without any water or food, which is a form of cruelty, we think there would be consequence in the reality. And those who would do such a thing would be judged by others as evil. Now, we think most of it is illness, mental illness, and reaction to some negativity that they may have had that has tarnished their thought process. Animals, most of them, are far more developed and intelligent than some humans. They're just having a different experience. And for a human to feel that they are the elite in incarnational process, they're completely wrong. There are dolphins, there are dogs, there are cats, there's all kinds of consciousnesses that are having different experiences that are just as valid and just as intelligent as a human is. And to treat them poorly is like treating a human poorly. In the culture, we do think at some point it will be judged the same way. Let's say you kill an animal, you torture an animal, there's consequence for that. Time for you to contemplate your behavior. So we'd say that, yeah, there is a lot of things that go on. And some animals do come in to help teach, to help the human who is participating with them to be better, to have some more empathy, to have some more heart. Now, some, it's going to be a long walk to have more empathy and heart, but animals do come in to do that. Most of them are way more evolved than humans.
Thank you, Veronica. And I'll just add a note, of course, as I'm often to do. I had a distant relative who was arguing that, dolphins couldn't possibly be, or whales be that intelligent as humans. And my response simply was, if I was a dolphin and I had three-dimensional experience through thousands of miles of water, unlimited food, and I could communicate telepathically, why on God's green earth, and I use God's in quotes, would I need to build the Empire State Building? It's like, come on, give me a break. Okay, so this next one is from Sharon Smith, and she's asking about, for those of you who don't know who Edgar Cayce is, guess what? There's a lot of millennials who don't. Edgar Cayce was in the 1940-ish, 30s-ish, a psychic who, when he went to sleep, for the first 15 minutes, if you got him right, he'd flutter his eyes, he's laying flat on the couch, and you could talk to an entity. They did 15,000 readings, and fortunately they were written down by, they didn't have recording like we do now, so, who knows what he sounded like, but this was an entity. Well, Edgar Cayce says this. Guess what? It was the entity who said it. It was probably the same entity over and over again. And it was a really great thing that Edgar brought. Sharon Smith says, when we pass, will he have access to the records that Edgar Cayce spoke of? And I know a little bit about it, and it's like Edgar Cayce referred to the Akashic Records. It's well known that I don't particularly care for labels, but a lot of people say the Akashic Records. That means everything that's ever happened. And the fact is that high-level entities probably do have access to that, but I'll let Veronica comment on that. When they die, will they have access to the Akashic Records?
When you are no longer focused in linear form, you have access to anything you want. It's really difficult for those of you who are incarnate at the moment to take that timeline out of it, to take that single focus out of it, because it's so necessary while being in the physical linear. But when you do cross over, that veil is lifted. And it's not just the Akashic Records, it's everything. And everything all about you and others. There's the amount of information is infinite. Now, it sounds a bit overwhelming because all of you are focused very clearly and singularly in the linear. So to have something like an avalanche of information come down at you, it feels a bit overwhelming. And when it is defined as Akashic Records, then it feels a little bit more like a library, an organized central station where all the information is housed, which eases the linear thought process quite a bit, because they say, okay, it's not going to be an avalanche. It's going to be like a library that I can go to and check out a book. So it's important while in physical linear not to get overwhelmed. So you do have that kind of thought process, and that's why the Akashic Records were delivered and presented in the way they were. When you're not linear, information will just be there. It'd be like a sponge soaking up the water. All the water gets soaked into the sponge all at the same time. It doesn't go drop by drop. In the linear, it does. In non-physical, it doesn't.
Thank you, Veronica. And I will simply add that the fact that things are available does not mean that everybody's going to access them, because it takes a certain amount of skill and awareness and desire. You know, as I said also before, there's a lot of people, meaningful percentage, don't even know when they're dead. And I've talked to hundreds of different entities of all different types, and some know everything, and some are still struggling and waiting to hear from their guides to figure things out. I would like you to talk about, well, how can they find spiritual advancement and personal growth?
We have often been asked about joy. Joy is the true place of comfort and awareness that you are in sync with where you should be. Now, some of you in physical reality think, well, if I have this fine car, or if I have the beautiful house, or if I have all these things, or I have the ability to travel in luxury and constantly and stay within the parameters of good things, and that's being defined as linear, that's going to bring them joy. And we think that's a falsehood. True joy comes from being comfortable in your own skin. It comes from the concept that I am living my life in sync and in harmony with my soul. And I'm living life in a giving, loving way. Now, I give it, but I also like to receive a loving way and in a giving way. You have to be able to receive love to give love. And true joy comes from that reciprocation, that energy exchange that goes back and forth. It has nothing to do with things. It has nothing to do with how much you have. It has to do with how much your energy is in harmony with yourself and those around you.
Thank you, Veronica. And we receive questions about things that I usually don't talk about because they're basically highly focused and not really interested in what we're doing, which is personal growth and stuff. But there's some historical things that people ask about. And one is being ETs, which you'll notice we don't talk about that much because, yes, they are real, but, so what? We've had a kind of a yes or no question about Atlantis, and I think we should answer it. Did Atlantis exist? And is there anything we can learn from that?
There are hundreds of places that have existed that most don't have any awareness about. Atlantis is one of them. And this is an example of becoming a little too greedy too fast and not paying attention to what life was really all about. There was an overload of energy, and it caused mass confusion and the dissipation of the city and the realm, and those inhabitants upon it. Some lost their lives, some scattered to the winds, some ended up in Egypt, some ended up in Wales, some, they ended up all over the planet. They got scattered like a dandelion weed that you blow the little white things and it blows all over the place. That's what happened. It came from greed, and it came from the inability to grasp the concept of true living and what it's all about. So yes, it did exist. Yes, it did implode upon itself. And yes, a lot of you have Atlantean blood in you and just don't realize it, because it was scattered to the wind, and the remnants had to intermingle and intermarry with other places and people. But we would caution everyone not to get too caught up in all of the technology, but to get caught up more in the exchange of energy with others and the exchange of energy within yourself. You all got these little devices that you all run around with now, but don't make your primary relationship with the device. Primary relationships with those who are incarnate and those who have meaning to you.
Thank you, Veronica. And in terms of historical background, I can say that we've done hundreds, if not thousands, of readings. We've done tens of thousands of readings, but we haven't been that focused on Atlantis or extraterrestrials. I've only, to my knowledge, talked to one extraterrestrial and one someone from Atlantis. And although I personally like quartz crystals and have a bunch of them, almost none of the entities we've talked to over 20 years, 30 years even, could care less about those crystals, except for one named Nakeem. And Nakeem was an apprentice in Atlantis, and Nakeem was not only interested in the crystals, and I have a lot of them, she knew them individually by name. So, and talked about a lot of cool technology that can be done with crystals. And even in the early days, like 30 years ago, we were talking about somebody came and wanted us to get these certain kind of crystals. And then somebody came in and said, wait a minute, I'm going to find your spirit guides. What are you doing here? And they said, why do you want these crystals? And it was for a power source. And something I've been, distracted by in the past, apparently, and said, if this is what you want to do, we can do it. But you've gone this wrong way in the past, being interested in this technology. And based on that communication, I abandoned it. So let's see what the next comment is. This is an unusual perspective, I think, on parallel lives. And it's like, and the question is, how do we choose which parallel lives to focus on? And I could tell you my opinion, but I don't want to lead the witness, so I'll just give it to Veronica. How do we choose which parallel lives we should focus on?
Well, parallel lives are you, and all the probabilities and things that you didn't get done in this life, you do in another life. And you don't choose them. They are created by your higher consciousness. And they're not energies that are in the same time frame you're in. When we think there has been questions asked where, or how do I run into one of my parallel lives? You wouldn't in the dimensional space that you're in, because each parallel life is in its own dimensional space. It's very similar to the life you have now, but you made different choices, and there's different scenery, and there's different people interacting in a parallel life. So we would say that focusing on them probably isn't all that available. You might be able to do it, say, in a meditation. You might be able to do it in sort of a past life regression moment move into a parallel life instead of a past life. But it's not really necessary to focus on it. We think that just allowing them and having knowledge that they're there and maybe going in to take a look at it might be feasible. But it's you, parallel life is you having the experience as you. Let's say your name is Bob Smith. You're having that experience as Bob Smith, and you might have 9 parallel lives attached to that. And each of the parallel lives, by the way, think they're the primary one. So all of you are primary in a lot of ways. And it's not like you're the primary and these are all reflections. Each one is a primary. So it can be confusing, but just remember that the parallel life, if your name is Bob Smith, all of them are Bob Smith, making different choices, having different experiences. Maybe in one life you married Mary, but in another life you never met her. So there's a lot of richness in a parallel life, and it sort of picks up the slack where something didn't happen in this particular life. You pick it up in a parallel life.
Thank you, Veronica. And this is a follow-up question from the same person, which was Anna Carolla. And that is, what if I prefer to move permanently into another parallel life? Well, I'm physical, I'm adding that part. Can I do it?
You might be able to consciously observe it, but you have to remember that parallel life feels just as valid as you do and might not appreciate you showing up to claim the life. How would you feel if someone who looked just like you showed up and said, "Okay, I'm gonna live here now"? Each of you have your own experience. Each of you feel you're the primary one. Each of you feel that it's your life. You can observe and you can glean information and evolvement from it, but we don't think you'd want to move into a parallel life. The life you have is the clay you have to mold and create a life for yourself. Use it wisely.
Thank you, Veronica. And I will mention that in certain research projects we've done with producers and so forth, it's possible we have done this to talk, not only to talk to parallel lives, but talk to future parallel lives. And I mean, talk to them like I am talking to you now. So you producers out there, heads up. So this is the point of the show where Veronica's going to give her message to you in the world. Hold on.
We understand that the culture, the planet, is in rather holiday mode. It is the end of the year. It is the usual time for reflection, and it is a usual time to decide, okay, this is what I'm going to do better next year. We think that all of you should take that time of reflection and decide not what to do linearly, but decide what you're going to do soulfully in your coming future time frame. Decide that whatever happened last year is in the past. If it was good, you put it in your pocket and say, I'm going to save this nice energy for when I need it. If it didn't go well, you say, I'm going to leave this energy here in this particular time frame, in this year, so that I can move freshly into the new year and not be encumbered by any sort of negativity that may have occurred with or without my input. Sometimes things happen and you don't have the input and you're just kind of stuck in the middle of this tidal wave and you go, oh my God, what do I do now? Leave it all behind. Whatever happened has happened. It can't be changed, but you can change how you feel about it. And you can change how you look at it. And you can say to yourself, okay, that wasn't so great. But moving into my new year, I'm going to embrace my soul. I'm going to embrace the magnificent energy that I know I am. I'm going to get in line with my purpose. I'm going to get in line with who I am as a soul and begin the year freshly. That is a good combination of eternal perspective and linear perspective, all rolled into one. And that's how all of you should live every single day, not to mention your, quote, new year.
Thank you, Veronica. And as I'm often saying, this concludes the interesting part of the radio and podcast broadcast. If you want more information about April Crawford or how to contact for in-person conversations, check out Amazon.com, search April Crawford, or just go to aprilcrawford.com. This is a live broadcast, by the way, unedited, completely unedited. And I have to hang up now because in 10 minutes we have somebody calling for a personal session with Veronica. Adieu, and we can't wait to hear from you next time.